So let's switch to FSD for a second. I was thinking about that, the value of it. And I think that really hinges on what probability do you assign that Tesla will actually achieve autonomous driving? That, 80% of people in their cars either subscribe or buy and an eventual road to Robotaxi. I think you obviously assign a high probability. I assign a high probability. Machine, I believe, does as well, but maybe lower than my and Omar's probability. Right, Machine?
Sorry, give me a second.
So let's say 80% probability between Omar, what do you think is the probability of um, Tesla achieving full self-driving, where you kind of put it on and check out? You can do other things in the car, not even Robotaxi, but you can do other things in the car. What percent probability do you assign to that future? Let's say in 3 to 5 years.
99%.
Yeah, I would say the same. Um, Wes probably around there too, right, Wes?
Yeah, probably more like 95, but yeah, more or
Right,
less the same.
95, and Sawyer.
I'd be in like the 90, 95 range.
Yeah. Okay. So we're all above 90. I would think Machine is probably above 90 as well, but maybe more like 90 to 95, like Sawyer. Omar, what do you think is the probability that the market assigns to that feature? That Tesla will achieve full self-driving, um, where you kind of put it on and you can check out, do other things in the car, but not necessarily a robotaxi feature in the next 3 to 5 years. What do you think is the market placing on that?
5 to 10%.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Market's placing 5 to 10%. And really, the conversation should involve when Tesla does achieve it, will it be able to charge an economic profit? Or will the profits be competed away by Waymo, Mobileye, and other players? That's really the crux of the debate right now in Tesla's valuation. Because if the Tesla energy business is $100 billion and automotive margins and growth rate is lower than Tesla Energy, the current market cap minus those two is really mostly around Tesla's ability to achieve full self-driving. I think most people in this space probably think 80% or higher, but the market, I agree with Omar, thinks it's more like 5 to 10%. So Wes, sorry, who just came off of mute?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was at this WeWork office in Chinatown last night working. They have faster internet there. And so then I took a Waymo home and it was like driving through Chinatown, like making all these crazy moves. And, they've really got it working to the point where it can do anything. And FSD 12 is actually already driving smoother and better than it in many cases. It still has more interventions and accelerator presses, but the end-to-end framework has already produced like maneuvers that I haven't seen a Waymo be able to do, and like smoother driving, less wheel jittering. It's really kind of remarkable. So I think the investment world hasn't accepted enough as a conclusion that yeah, we actually did figure out how to make self-driving work at a safety level greater than a human. And Waymo did a study. They said 80% of injury causing crashes were reduced. So you could reduce 80% with the technology they have today. And Tesla's with their V12 basically going to make that available in a generalized way. So, forget about Tesla for a second. Autonomy is definitely coming, and regardless of who owns it, right? Even if Tesla doesn't figure it out and they have to license it from somebody else, let's say they have to license it from Waymo or Baidu or somebody, it's still going to change the nature of the auto business forever, right? So there's like this tidal wave coming. And Tesla's been preparing. They've been saying, okay, we want to sort of own this technology ourselves. But it's going to transform, I think, pretty much every aspect of the business.
Even if Waymo were to figure it out, maybe at the same time Tesla does, they don't have a fleet to just flip the switch on and start doing robotaxis. They gotta either retrofit existing vehicles or buy up a bunch of other legacy auto manufacturing vehicles. So it's kind of difficult for them to scale. I mean, they're only doing like Tesla does as many FSD beta miles per day, I think, as Waymo does in like 1 or 2 years. So I don't know what their fleet looks like at scale.
Yeah, while Sawyer was talking, 3 more Teslas that can run FSD were produced. One is produced every 20 seconds now at the 2023 run rate. Waymo has 1,000 cars total. Tesla's going to make 40,000 cars this week.
I think a lot of people get caught up in the who will get there first. But even if you get there first, can you do it at scale? And like, even if Tesla doesn't get there first, which I think they will, they can do it at scale pretty simply, just because they already have a fleet of 5.5 million vehicles. And maybe BYD has a large fleet too, but
Well,
Waymo, Cruise, all of them will have a difficult time.
so Waymo is already there. Right? Waymo already has autonomous driving. They're expanding to multiple cities. They're buying more cars. They're working on their own purpose-built robotaxi design as well. So they're there first. I agree with Sawyer that getting to scale is the more important question, but we also should not discount. Like, we should be talking about the probability of Tesla being able to charge. Let's get what Wes has to say first. Wes?
Yeah, the ability for any solution to scale is predominantly the issue at hand. Because like you could essentially today you could take a trained model and use an inference size that's enormous and potentially solve it, but you can't put that in a vehicle and drive around like that would driving with a data center in the vehicle. The whole purpose of this is to make it small enough to fit into a car to drive around with. And that's what Tesla's doing. And Waymo just hasn't really figured that out yet because their vehicle is far too expensive to scale. And it'd take forever to build them because it's all bespoke. Every one of those vehicles is unique. So that therein lies the problem with scale. But that was kind of like a little thing that I wanted to say. And then I also wanted to ask Omar a few questions on his recent drives, but that can wait.
Yeah, just wait on that for a second. So Wes, let me ask you, fast forward 3 to 5 years, how many Tesla robotaxis are operating on the roads in US roads without a driver, and how many Waymo vehicles are operating without a driver?
The short version to your answer is I did that calculation and I calculated 2 million dedicated 24/7 robotaxis are needed to take over completely the rideshare market. And that's not the normal like 2 trillion miles that US roads handle every year, but that's just all the rideshare current demand miles. And obviously Tesla would decimate any competitor because they can operate at much, much less cost per mile. So I don't see there being any competition once they solve FSD. I just don't see how. There's just no TAM left available for any other competitor.
Omar, do you agree with that statement? When Tesla solves FSD and we have 2 million Teslas taking over the rideshare market without a driver in 3 to 5 years, there won't be a competitor. Or Tesla will be able to operate at a much lower cost per mile than others.
I mean, so there's almost no market in the world where there isn't competition. So, of course, you would expect ride sharing to become kind of a commoditized market one way or another, naturally. But I mean, you're talking like trillions of miles traveled, right? So you're talking like a multi-trillion-dollar market. If you can capture, let's say, a third of a $5 trillion market, that can be, over $1 trillion of revenue a year. So I don't expect them to be the only player, but I expect them to be one of the largest scale players. And that's really what matters to people. They want to call a ride and have it show up quickly and have it be fast, have it be reliable, have it load all their settings, all the things we love about sort of the Tesla software experience today. And nobody's real like nobody really has a path to having the software or the hardware or the production. Um, and Tesla's doing all three at the same time.
Sawyer, do you have any thoughts on the topic?
No, the last thing I'll just add is with Waymo, obviously they're backed by Google, so they've really deep pockets. So if they want to get into, building their own vehicle, they certainly can, but it'd be harder for other places. Oh, and one correction on the thing I said earlier today. The Mega Pack waiting time is not 18 months. It's actually, you can get one in Q4 of this year. So it's dropped quite a bit.
I mean, I don't worry about Waymo really. I look at comma, actually. Like, okay, if someone can just buy a little thing for $1,000 and add an open source FSD to their car, that might actually be much more successful than Waymo. I mean, Waymo's business model is, one where they burn billions of dollars of cash. Comma's actually profitable. So I would probably look at them honestly more than Waymo.
When do you think is Comma changing lanes yet, Omar?
No. I mean, Comma doesn't like, i- you know, they don't really have the same kind of hardware suite. They kind of have one thing. It's kind of like a dash mounted GPS, and it's got a forward camera and it's got kind of like two rear facing side cameras, but there aren't actually like any cameras on the car. The last time I saw a demo of their end to end system, they were using the blind spot indicator for lane changes. So they weren't even like looking to see if there was something there. They were just kind of using the car's blind spot indicator, which obviously is not really a very high fidelity view. So their sensor suite is pretty limited. So we'd really be looking at something in the future, probably with an expanded sensor suite, maybe with cameras you can mount around the car, mount to the window or something like that. Um, or I believe it should be possible just with like a 360 cam on a dash mounted device. I believe that by 2030 it should be possible theoretically to buy a GPS sized device, like a Garmin sized device with a camera that, was just on your windshield and could see 360, see out your windows, and that should be able to drive the car. Or you should be able to have like a humanoid robot that could drive any car just by turning its head.
Okay, so if a Tesla bear comes to you, so by the way, guys, I have to play a little bit of devil's advocate because I've been listening to these recordings and I'm like, we're just agreeing on a lot of things, and that doesn't make a good debate. So, Omar, if someone comes to you and says, in 2030, exactly what you just said, in 2030, either you can get a 360 camera, put on any car, it'll be drive itself, or buy a humanoid that can drive any car, then the value of FSD, full self-driving for Teslas, is not hundreds of billions of dollars, trillion dollars. What do you say to them to convince them otherwise to buy Tesla stock?
I think that Tesla could be doing over $1 trillion of revenue in 2030 from FSD and related Tesla network services. When you look at, 30% of all the rides happening on the platform, plus people, buying packages, buying subscriptions, buying plans, whatever the hell the pricing looks like at that time, we're really talking about transportation globally. people drive trillions of miles a year. So when the market goes from buying cars every few years to buying travel by the mile, there's going to be this huge demand for people to call cars to get around. And if they take even, a quarter of the market or something, it's hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions. So I think the market opportunity is absolutely huge. Obviously, in any market in cars, you expect it to be competitive, but autonomy will probably be a many fewer players compared to the automotive market. In the automotive market, you really have a ton of players and they're all very sort of competitive with each other. In autonomy, I expect there to really be not more than three large players. Um, and the reason for that is just really the flywheel, the data advantage. You have the best system, so people keep using it, so it keeps getting better, so it becomes the best system. And kind of like how we have iOS and Android and or Mac, Windows, Linux, that kind of thing. When you have these sort of tech platforms with network effects, it tends to sort of coalesce around two or three big platforms. And I think Tesla is going to be one of them. I think there will be others. I think one of them could be a Chinese company. They have actually incredible AI talent in China, and maybe there'll be a third. Maybe there won't be. But it's a much more winner take most or winner take all sort of market compared to automotive hardware because of the sort of network effects inherent in this AI flywheel.
Very good. Thank you.
Like you know, a lot of people don't realize the Tesla drives better than the Waymo. It's smoother, it jitters less with V12, and you can really see the power of having all that data from so many different edge cases. Like I could videotape it and you could see the wheel, jerking around in a Waymo compared to how smooth it is in
Actually,
FSD.
that's a really good transition to what Wes was going to ask you. A couple of questions before that. Quick note that we have a link at the top if you want to support the space. Sign up for Patreon, and you can do it through the link at the top, which goes to my notes on Form 10K filing for Tesla. All right, Wes, questions for Omar on V12.
Yeah, you'll probably remember this. It was a left turn that you did not think the vehicle was going to make, but it ended up kind of like going through the intersection and then actually did make the left turn, and you were wondering if that was legal or not. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in San Francisco, when you're sort of coming up from the freeway, the street branches into two directions. I think Hayes Street and Geary or something, or Pine. And so the first time it did it, it actually did go to the left side. But this time, for whatever reason, there was heavy traffic and it kind of stayed on the right side. And it was able to just make a really sharp, like, it can make lane changes like you can't even imagine. Like, we thought V11 was good with lane changes. This thing can make lane changes so close and really just sort of like dip in there. It was crazy. Like, there was like, tight traffic and it just sort of slipped in there. And then there was kind of like an area of the road where it could go over and make a left turn, and it made a left turn. So, there was some debate. Some people were saying, oh, it shouldn't have done that. That's illegal, whatever. Even though, there's nothing wrong with changing. It's not illegal to change lanes in an intersection. It's frowned upon because, it can potentially cause confusion. But, what would a human do? Would they say, oh, I can't change lanes in an intersection? Or would they try to avoid missing the turn? But then the other crazy thing is, I didn't even think there was a way to get in there. And then there was that little dip there. But that's exactly what I, as a human, would have done. So it makes sense that if you just show it humans driving, that's the kind of stuff we do. If we're about to miss a turn, we don't miss the turn. We always try and go the right way if we can. And that's always been a reason to not use FSD is like it can make stupid mistakes like that. If you're just sort of spacing out, you know, it might totally miss a turn. And now you wasted an extra 5, 10 minutes, whatever, or potentially get caught in some really bad traffic jam because it missed a turn. So, you know, there's really two areas of this. There's should it do it and can it do it? So the should, okay, yeah, we can debate should it do it. You can refine that over time, sort of, you know, massage the training data set, train it to do what you think is the appropriate thing. But what I really was astounded by is the fact that it could do it. The fact that it could make that lane change with really tight moving traffic and sneak in there when I thought that, you know, all hope is lost. It's missed the turn. So it was definitely sort of an interesting moment. You know, it has done things that are sort of like, you know, questionable, but always very human.
Yeah, I found that turn to be fascinating because it did seem on some level to have more knowledge of the road than the human does. And I was wondering if it sounds like you think it might kind of feel like that too. And it didn't seem like it did something illegal. I wouldn't say that because it was technically after the intersection because it's that extra left that's available in that intersection. That left is available there. But I thought
Yeah,
that
I
was
think it was
fascinating.
actually perfectly legal.
Yeah. And I was kind of amazed by it because I have yet to really see an example of FSD knowing about lanes or road segments ahead of it and using that in its kind of path planning and controls. And that was like one example where I could say potentially it was potentially doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't believe the moves this thing pulls off sometimes. It's kind of crazy. Like, it is just remarkably human like. I mean, you kind of just accept that FSD is a certain way. You're like, okay, I kind of just can't do that. And then you just see this version doing things that, you know, you never imagined FSD doing before. It's pretty crazy. Like it can make some really tight maneuvers.
Wes, any other questions for Omar or any comments that you want to make on FSD V12 before we wrap it up?
Yeah, maybe one. It seems like the first set of videos that you were putting out, you were overtaking when you had to press the throttle. But now I'm seeing less of that. I feel like there's less times where you have to do that, and also I'm seeing that it's hesitant at four-way stops when there's a stop sign. And I was wondering if it wasn't as hesitant there, what other things do you think would be like kind of the top issues that you would have you would want it to see fixed first?
Well, it's actually way better at four-way stops. It stops, it goes at its turn, just like a normal person. It's good at asserting itself if it's crowded and there's a lot of people and scooters and everything. Instead of getting stuck, it can kind of like creep in a little bit. It's really like amazing. Like I posted this clip of this really crowded street, Union Street, and there's all these people. It's the day of the 49ers game. And there's all these people walking around, getting into cars, doing all this stuff. And it just waits and finds its opportunity and crosses. And we had AI driver do the same thing the night before when it wasn't even as crowded. And he had to press the accelerator pedal several times to get through there. So it was able to get through with no accelerator press. The one issue that I have been having at stop signs, and this is kind of funny, is if I'm at a stop sign and there's a traffic light ahead of me that's red, it will not move from the stop sign until the light turns green. So there are like a few places that have this, like a stop sign, and then there's a traffic light up ahead here in San Francisco. But I'm guessing in the training data set, they only showed it examples where like red light equals red, or at least they didn't show it enough examples of like a stop sign and a red light. So somehow it just picked up on red light equals red. So I see that stop. And they really need to show it more examples where, okay, the light's red, but you're at a stop sign. So go from the stop sign and proceed forward. So I expect they're already fixing that. They told me when they called me, they're like, look, there's some really obvious stupid stuff in here, but we just wanted you to see kind of like the general thing. And so that would probably be the biggest thing. If they fix that, I would have like probably 75% of my accelerator presses have been related to that issue. And there is a little bit of hesitancy, a little bit of like failing to creep sometimes when there's low visibility. I've noticed it's like much better at knowing when it has visibility. The old FSD just like wouldn't care. If it didn't have visibility, it would just go anyway sometimes and you'd be kind of afraid. But this version is kind of the opposite problem. If it doesn't have visibility, it's like very timid, creeping, almost too much. But it's a good sign that it doesn't that it knows when it doesn't have good visibility, but it needs to be a little more assertive. Then the most critical class of issues seems to be that the internal sort of occupancy network, they threw away the occupancy network and they now have sort of this internal occupancy network within the thing. And it doesn't seem to be quite as refined as the old occupancy network. We had some issues where there were like some white sort of pillars in the road, like little plastic things, pedestrian don't cross sign, that kind of thing. And it seemed to be getting a little bit too close to those signs, whereas with V11, it was able to get right in between. So, I see a bug like this. I'm like, okay, I think it's really possible to make this better. We've seen how good the occupancy network has gotten. But at the same time, it seems to be a little bit of a step back in that way. And I've had times where I've had to take over due to it feeling a little bit too close to cars or things like that. So I think that is also part of that sort of internal occupancy network. I think they just need to feed in a lot more clips to the scale of the old occupancy network to really get it to surpass that level of quality. But I think it will actually surpass the old occupancy network once they do that, because with end to end, it's just so much more powerful. You can see so much more like on top and on the bottom of the stack. It's not just generating this sort of representation of occupancy, but how does that actually translate into the driving policy end to end? And I think that's kind of just a much more powerful framework. So, yeah, those are probably the biggest things. The biggest annoyance for me is the stopping at the stop sign until the light turns green. Although I just have to push the accelerator for that, it's not that big of a deal. But I would love it if they could eliminate 75% of my accelerator presses by doing that. And probably the most crucial is uh, the occupancy network thing. But the biggest issue probably preventing the rollout is that it is it's kind of funny. It's sort of relearning a lot of bad behaviors they fixed in some cases because it's just kind of coming from the training data. But some of the NHTSA recall items, it's gone back on sort of handling them incorrectly. Like I've sometimes seen it roll stop signs in a very human sort of way, but obviously you have to stop to zero. So that's kind of fun to see, but obviously it's a bug. So they, they got to really dig through that point whatever percent. There was also a recall related to, being in a turn lane and getting out and signaling and that type of thing. And I've seen it mistakenly get in a left turn lane, but then decide to go straight to keep with the route and just kind of jumping back in. So that might be something they need to sort of address too. Um, I can see regulators really giving them a hard time about this update because it just is so human like in some of the behaviors and in ways that might make them nervous, like for example, you know moving before the pedestrian is 100% crossed out of the crosswalk, which is a huge usability improvement, but kind of keeps them nervous. So if I had to rank it, probably number one occupancy network stuff, number two NHTSA stuff, and making sure they just comply with everything, or else they're going to have to issue another recall fixing the same issues again, which, doesn't really matter, but there's going to be headlines about it, obviously. And then, my personal kind of pet peeve issue, the stopping at the stop sign until the light turns green.